So good evening, friends. Looks like we have a smaller group than normal, so hope everyone is uh, cutting class intentionally. That's the only bad news is when we don't do what we do with intention. So hope everyone's well. This is our sixth week in our second course. For those of you counting at home, we're just passing the 1/3 mark for our year-long progression of deep dive practice and study overview of Buddhism. And tonight and next week, we're going to take a deeper dive because I think it really warrants multiple looks into the six realms. And so tonight, we're going to go a little deeper into some of the practices and ideas and experiences associated with the higher realms. So we're going to begin with meditation practice. We'll start, as we have been, with about 10 minutes of shamatha, calm abiding mindfulness practice, or maybe 15 minutes. And then we're going to do loving kindness meditation for a group of people. So we're going to start to move into a slightly more interpersonal or collective sense of doing metta or maitri or a loving kindness meditation. So let's take the next minute or so to get into our online meditation seat and take our seat fully. So again, there's always this sense of confidence as we take our meditation seat. A sense of revisiting almost like a seat of power where your mind becomes workable, becomes not under your control, but becomes familiar enough to revisit and just to sense as we practice again and again. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I can work with my awareness and I can hold this seat. So let's see if we can find that sense of workability both in our physical posture and just with the energy that we bring to taking our seat. And when you feel ready, you can check in. Just take a taste of your current state of mind. See what you're bringing to practice today. And also perhaps reflect on your intention for practice and your intention also for studying these teachings altogether, if that's simple to revisit. And then we'll start working with mindfulness awareness practice without guidance for about the next 10, 12 minutes. So I'm going to encourage you to transition to loving kindness and to bring to mind as we move into this group loving kindness practice. Bring to mind right now a way that maybe you are struggling a little bit yourself. So it could be an existential or mental struggle. It could be a very physical struggle. It could be the logistics of life. Just think of a way in your life that you experience a little bit of the First Noble Truth right now. And then I'd invite you to think about that as a group. In other words, to think about yourself and others who struggle similarly. And maybe you come up with a name for this identified group. For example, all parents of small children, or all amateur soccer players, whatever it is for you. So it's a group that is inclusive of your identified experience, either specific or broad. And we'll work with that sense of group identity as we work with the 4 phrases of loving kindness from Munindra and Sharon Salzberg, using the pronoun we. May we be safe. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we live with ease. Just notice what it feels like to be part of a group as you visualize joining your mind with the wish for loving kindness. And then we can let this practice go, come back into our body for a few closing moments, seeing if we can be very gently but completely present with just 3 closing breaths. So thank you for your practice. Thanks for showing up to class tonight and yesterday in New York and the Northeast. Well, I don't know, but I know in Western Massachusetts, it's been very nice as well. So thanks for coming inside for class. And if you're in a place where the weather's not very nice, thanks also for coming inside for class. So we're going to look a little bit more deeply into the so-called higher realm experience. When we talk about the 3 higher realms in this classic framework of the 6 realms, we're talking about God realm, Deva in Sanskrit, which I do believe has a linguistic root with the English term diva. If you want to check that out, watching the Met Gala photos on Instagram and Twitter last night gave me a real sense of the kind of beauty of at least a momentary God realm experience. And then what's sometimes called the jealous God realm, what's also I've seen called the war God realm, the demigod realm, the not quite gods yet realm, the asuras in Sanskrit, Asura usually spelled, and then the human realm. And again, I want to try to tie in why we're studying this in relationship with the mind-only system, if that's not obvious, and also why we're studying this in relationship with our study of metta or Maitri meditation. And I also want to frame this as this interesting interplay with these realms as there being a view. It's interesting that I often find myself saying belief, but really it's not a belief in Buddhism, it's a view, it's a frame of reference for our experience or our exploration of ideas and experiences. So there's a view that these are actual realms where a bodied being can be reborn. You could actually have your address in the God realm and live for thousands of years in that experience and be born into that space. And the classic view is that could, with enough positive seeds planted in the ape consciousness, that sort of experience could happen for any of us. And the classic Tibetan view is we've all been there many lifetimes before. This is not our first trip around the Ferris wheel from a classic Tibetan standpoint. So there's a view that these are actual realms, and then there's a view that's held by some of the texts in modern life that we might read, like the text by David Nichtern, like the way Mark Epstein relates the six realms with Freudian thought in his book Thoughts Without a Thinker, like how Chogyam Trungpa paints this very poetic but mystical psychological picture in Myth of Freedom and other places. There's this view that these describe states of mind and states of shared relationship, shared projection that we enter just in our human lives. And what I really want to say, obviously, because we're humans and we want to make these teachings useful, and we don't want to be too mystical or religious about our approach, we're obviously taking that view that when we're talking about the realms, we're talking about different states of mind that we all move through. And that was definitely the view that David took. But I do want to say that from the standpoint of the mind-only philosophical system, you can start to see why, from a Buddhist philosophical perspective, there's actually not a difference between the kind of more mystical view of you could be reborn as a god or a hungry ghost, and the more psychological view that these are states of mind that we move through and project our experience onto. Because the mind-only system is coming from this kind of radically interesting view that mind or consciousness is the kind of prime causer of experience, including physical experience, you can see why there's not actually that much difference between talking about the God realm as a blissed out human experience versus talking about it as an actual rebirth experience. Because in either case, it's about a sense of self that's solidified, seeds of habitual patterns that are watered or brought to life, that flower and then are projected onto a physical experience. And so obviously, I mean, I find it's, if for example, we use up all of our natural resources on planet Earth in the coming decades, you can see very clearly how Earth could become more like an animal and hungry ghost realm, right? The physical landscape takes on the qualities of the minds that inhabit it. So there's not, from the standpoint of mind only, there's this coalescence almost between a psychological system and a mystical or religious belief system. But I don't want to trip us out too much. We're going to take the view mainly that we're looking at being a human being and experiencing these states of mind. And it seems useful to start with the higher realms, the places where comfort and at least temporary safety seem more accessible to the consciousness inhabiting this space. Another way of looking at this, feeding this back through last week's conversation on the eight consciousnesses, is you could say that in the higher realms, the karmic seeds that are planted in the eighth consciousness come from more positive habitual patterns, right? Having like a repetitive discipline about the way we go about things, having a sense of generosity, having a care for intelligent experience and thought, right? So this is the classic view. However, the view is also that when a positive habitual pattern or seed is planted, it's done with this sense of me. So what's the difference between the way a being who inhabits a higher realm might experience, for example, discipline, and discipline as a practice of awakening is and we'll study this when we get fully into the Bodhisattva path in our next course, the notion is that if it's a samsaric act of the higher realms, the discipline is always done with the sense of the seventh consciousness wants to get something out of the experience. It wants to use the positive habitual pattern to try to solidify its identity a little bit further, right? So the higher realms are very much confused realms of experience on the one hand, but they also have these qualities of benefit and positivity and health and comfort that perhaps we can learn something from, that has to do with liberating from samsara and achieving a more awakened state. Perhaps we can transform the self-fixated identification and turn that into some kind of compassionate opening for both ourselves and others, right? So a lot of times when I think of what's being written now about sort of the major shortcomings of the wellness movement or the mindfulness movement, I think about it in this way, that basically in classic Buddhist terms, one of the critique is we're trying to use these different wellness practices or health and well-being, or mindfulness or yogic breathing or any of this stuff. We're trying to use it to solidify the self. And so what we end up with is a kind of God realm approach to these wellness practices, right? And that's why, I'm sorry, but if anybody looks at the magazines that are at the checkout line of Whole Foods, if anybody has a Whole Foods near you, which is sort of a higher realm samsaric experience to begin with, and you look at the magazines, which I'll say it's wonderful. They focus on so many wellness magazines, Lion's Roar, Yoga Journal, etc. But it feels like this very beautified version of a wellness practice, right? That it's almost like about getting more comfort and bliss, more self-identified solidity in a realm of wellness, right? Sometimes I think that that's actually the best modern definition of the God realm is the wellness realm. Does that make sense? I don't want to diss wellness practice here. I'm a big fan of that. Most of the people in my life do or teach wellness practices, but this sense of the view of it, I once joked with a friend who's a yoga teacher that the way yoga seems to be taught a lot of times, at least in the Western world, I said, it seems like they're teaching Buddhism without any of the bad news. And without any of the bad news is the experience of the God realm, right? So the God realm, there's this tremendous generation of health, of richness, of beautified experience. And there are, within the context of a supportive environment, there are certain general karmic practices that we can learn, right, that aren't guaranteed to work. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, and it's interdependent with one's environment, but to gain further wellness, to gain further peace, right? And it's almost like the gods have spent lifetime after lifetime building up this sense of wellness until it becomes bliss, actually. It moves beyond wellness into this space of bliss. And so there's an element of a God realm experience, I would say, is a kind of comfort where, as David said, you lose track of discomfort. there's, in a God realm experience, there's this subtly underlying feeling of just don't, nothing kill my vibe right now. Please don't kill my vibe. I think that's the sort of anxiety of the God realm. It's like, it could be that experience where you're having a picnic and it's a gorgeous spring or summer day and you're outside and it's a Sunday, Does anyone know that experience? I used to experience this in school all the time. That creeping, even on the best Sunday ever, you just knew tomorrow was Monday. And that feeling starts to creep into this gorgeous Sunday picnic that you're having. And you just start to feel like Sunday and the ease and the bliss of being outdoors and enjoying good food or being with people you care about and feeling the warm breeze on you. It just feels like a bubble about to burst. And so God realm experience has that sense of not wanting the bubble to burst and therefore becoming really, to use a word from the current sort of psychological and educational lexicon, the thing about the God realm is there's no resilience in the God realm, right? When we're in a God realm state, it's almost like we forgot that we can adapt to change. And that's the real enemy of the gods and in our human body, that the sort of the thing that the God needs to contemplate is the truth of impermanence. Not as a sabotage of the beautiful Sunday picnic or the good vibe or the wellness space, right? But contemplate the fact that this experience is going to end, And we bring God realm to our wellness practice all the time when we have a good meditation session or a good workout or even a good insight into the teachings. And there's a feeling of like, this is it. This is it. Now I know how it feels to feel good. And please nothing come along and change this. You know that feeling of like when you're kind of, the meditation session has finally gotten good, you've put in the effort, maybe you've put in weeks or months or years of effort, and there's just a sense of like, that subtle, please nothing screw this up. That's the way I think of kind of God realm suffering. Please nothing change this. And so this loss of resiliency makes the God realm actually the most fragile of the higher realms, because it's so avoidant. It's so ignorant of this basic fact of reality. So I love this other notion from the six realms, which David mentioned and is in his book, that each realm, an awakened being or the awakened mind, which doesn't mean we're actually visited by a Buddha in some like Charles Dickens Ghost of Christmas Past style. It means that the awakened mind appears in a different form. And in the God realm, I love this. This is one of my favorite bits about classic Buddhist narratives. The Buddha, it's said, appears as a musician. So this is like, sometimes art is the way to wake up the gods. And so I've thought about that a lot, like why a musician? It's because, right, to enter this realm of experience, things are only going to even enter our wellness realm, our bliss realm, our don't kill my vibe realm If they are beautiful enough for us to say, oh yeah, please, yeah, that's beautiful, you know. And so music or art is beautiful enough to be heard when we're in a God realm space, but it's also heartbreaking, and the notes and the songs end. So it's just a little message that can enter the God realm of the sort of tenderness of being a being and a reminder of impermanence. And it's the music is the only reminder of impermanence that is beautiful enough to enter the God realm. So that's why the Buddha teaches as a musician. Just tries to go around breaking God's hearts a little bit so that they wake up and learn to pop their own wellness and bliss bubble a little bit, because their other option is this total lack of resiliency that ends up in this just totally delusional end of cycle experience where it's said that the gods at the end of their cycle go straight to the hell realm because of this complete lack of ability to deal with reality. Right. So it's actually a good practice, I think, the next time you're having a really pleasant experience, like the next time there's a gorgeous Sunday and tomorrow's Monday, see if you can actually hold both of those, right? To actually contemplate the impermanence of a pleasant experience without sabotaging that experience. That's how we work with our God realm mind. The jealous God realm, right? David talked about this. I felt a fair amount, which is, I think this is a very kind of modern experience. I'll self-report that I like to be on Twitter, and I have no idea how and when Twitter verifies your account. For some people, Twitter gives a little blue and white check mark that means that you're like a verified person. Have people seen this? I think it's on other social media platforms as well. And so sometimes I see somebody who seems to like not have many followers and their account's verified. And I'll just be honest, I'm just reporting amongst friends that sometimes that gives me a jealous God experience of like, how does a person get their account verified? What, am I not important enough to be a real person on your account? Jack, who's the head of Twitter, who supposedly does Vipassana meditation retreats. Don't get me started on the particular blindnesses of the way he reports on his meditative practice. It feels very, he wrote a whole thread on his Vipassana retreat that struck me as very not only God realm, but machismo God realm, machismo wellness realm. Right? So you have that thought and you're competing, right? You're competing. And we'll work with this, I think, probably in our 8th week together. We'll work with a practice that I think is great for our jealous God realm, because the jealous God realm is everything's fine. You're doing well. You know, you're safe. But you forgot that the point of doing well is to benefit is oneself and others. And so you're just always thinking about who might be doing better, you know. And so compassion and sympathetic joy, specifically from the four immeasurables, is a practice to bring about when we feel like we are in the jealous God realm. Does anybody feel like you have jealous God realm experiences? Am I the only one? When you compete? Sharon Salzberg, in her newer book, Real Love, makes this wonderful point, which I think is brilliant, about how comparative mind works, which is basically the God realm experience, is that we always compare what we feel bad at to what someone else feels great at. You know, so like you're in yoga class and somebody has a perfect inversion pose, perfect like handstand in the middle of the room, which I can't do because I've always had tight shoulders. And you compare your handstand to that, right? Rather than, but she says, you never think about like, there might be so many things that you are more adept at than that person. We only compare ourselves to what we're worse at, right? We never think about like, oh, maybe that person can't really cook, you know, or maybe that person has these other shortcomings, right? So we never get a complete picture in comparative mind. So we're always at war when we're actually okay. And I like the way that the jealous God Buddha manifests, because the jealous God Buddha, and I think this is also really important when we look at notions of Buddhism as some sort of passivity or some sort of like, oh, I don't want to get involved in any rat race. Like success is for, samsaric beings. The jealous God Buddha knows that if you want to wake up beings who are interested in accomplishing great things, which is what the jealous gods feel, they're not going to listen to somebody who doesn't understand what it's like to try to accomplish or succeed in a particular endeavor. So the Buddha shows up as a titan, as a warrior, as somebody who kicks ass, you know? And so I think it's important to continue to demonstrate, even though it can turn into the wellness realm, how much these practices and working with these practices brings about benefit and brings about effectiveness. And maybe rather than undercutting our desire to succeed or accomplish greatness, we can just shift the view on what greatness is into a greatness that is holistic, that is compassionate towards self and others, and that actually cares about benefiting, right? And so that's the notion, is that the Buddha shows up as a titan who can demonstrate, the Buddha, she or they. It's really important not to gender the Buddha he every time, because Buddha literally means one who has awakened, and there's countless ones throughout the eons of history. Right, so she or they shows up in the jealous God realm as a titan and says, I know how to get shit done, and I know how to be of benefit to both my own happiness and the benefit of others. So sympathetic joy and compassion are great practices when we find ourselves in the jealous God realm. But also a desire to look into what we want to achieve. I think that's really important when we find ourselves in the jealous God realm. Like, maybe I would like to have a voice in the world. And if having a blue and white check mark next to your name actually helps people take you seriously, maybe that's of some benefit. Who knows? So the human realm, which again is where we all live, but it's also a state of mind that we pass through day by day or moment by moment or year by year. I think all of us, to come to a course like this and care about teachings and ideas like this, we have to be in sort of a curious human realm space. Because let's be honest, this isn't blissful enough to be a God realm experience coming together each week like this. Like, can we be honest about? We're not having blissful, like, this is not like meditation on the beach with somebody fanning us. Right? This is a very human realm experience where there's a sense of safety. So we're free from the lower realm harms. This is a sense of privilege where we have enough leisure time to take this time out of our schedule and be here or watch or listen, which is
I didn't get that one.
Huge advantage. Did I cut out, or was that somebody else saying something else? So it's a huge advantage. But at the same time, there's a kind of groundedness in the human realm. And
No.
We are grounded in the sense that, how to say this? We still know what suffering looks like, you know. And so there's a really, the human realm is the best realm from every perspective. Because there is comfort and leisure, there is privilege. And I think we can take privilege to both mean that privilege is based on positive karmic traits that we've set in the past, to want to be curious about our experience, to want to practice, to want to wake up. But privilege also means that the environment, the supportive environment that not everyone has coalesced to give us that advantage, right? This is also where it's said that this is the only realm where the Buddha manifests as a kind of teacher or teachings or set of teachers or community that we can study with and have a path through. This is the only realm where there's a clear path to awakening, and the Buddha therefore shows up and says, let's talk about the Dharma. In every other realm, the Buddha is demonstrating something according to the teachings on the six realms, but not explicitly teaching anything, which is interesting. Which is also interesting because as some of us want to teach or want to at least encourage other people that we know to practice or get interested in some of these practices or ideas, this also provides a really interesting map. Like, if you want to teach Dharma to somebody who's in the God realm, teaching is not going to work, right? Directly, right? So again, in the jealous God realm, the Buddha shows up as a titan, as an achiever, as a warrior who can demonstrate that through their awakening, they succeed better and for even better reasons than the jealous gods. So the Buddha shows up as a badass in the jealous God realm, as an artist in the God realm, and as a teacher in the human realm. there has to be curiosity and balance in a person's mind to want to um, go along a path or practice. And there's also a strong desire to connect. Now, it's said that because of the balance of comfort and urgency, the human experience is the rarest pinnacle in all of the cycles of samsara. And I don't just mean that as being born human in this physical body, but also just the experience of the moments where we can really touch into both the privilege and the groundedness to say, I really want to look deeply. I really want to practice waking up for the benefit of self and others. There's this classic example that the dimensions change, but have people heard the example of the tortoise or the sea turtle in the ocean? Very classic example that's like almost a joke because it's told different ways. I'll just give you the version of it that I've heard from the Tibetan system, that having a moment or being born with this balance of human realm experience is as rare as imagining a sea turtle in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or let's say the Indian Ocean, from where this came from. And the sea turtle only comes to the surface once every 500 years. And there's a hula hoop or like a life preserver floating on the surface of the ocean. And the odds of being born in this precious human realm of balance of comfort and urgency are the same as the sea turtle popping up through the life preserver, through the hula hoop. I don't know who the heck thought of this image. It's so weird in a way that it's perfect. Like, who was thinking of these elements when they thought of, like, I need an example of rarity? But there's some balance there, and that's where this notion, this notion from the reading, the extra PDF that we had this week from Ryuman, Reverend Ilda Gutierrez Baldoquin, who's based in Western Massachusetts, talked about don't waste time. La vida es corta, no pierdas tiempo, en español. Right, and this is connected with a evening gata from the Soto Zen tradition that originates with the Zen master Dogen, which is perhaps one of my favorite chants in all of Buddhism. And I'll just share one of the translations, the translation that I'm the most familiar with in my study of Soto Zen. That goes, let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken, take heed, do not squander your life. And so the practice in the human realm is to find within this curiosity, but also within the pain of this balanced but privileged experience, find a sense of gratitude that we are not in either the lower or the higher realms, and to mix that sense of gratitude with an urgency for pursuing our path. So gratitude and urgency. I think without the gratitude, urgency becomes anxiety. And without the urgency, gratitude becomes complacency. I also think in these teachings of the six realms not to get up on my soapbox, because if you're unlucky enough to follow me on that Twitter format, you get enough of my soapbox. But I think this is actually the key to a Buddhist political theory as well, that the Buddhist political theory, and it's not that we necessarily know what policies, governmental policies could do this, but the view and the intention for a Buddhist leader would be, how do I bring as many humans as often as possible into the comfort and safety, but also the urgency and the reality, the curiosity about reality of the precious human birth, right? How do I bring more humans into the human realm? That's the origin of a Buddhist political theory to me. And I'm just gonna, maybe I'll get up on my soapbox for 1 second, say, universal health care, care for the environment, and awareness of the harms done to marginalized groups have to be part of that. Okay, I'm off the soapbox. So this is the beauty of the higher realms, is that there is a sense of work well done, good karma generated to get there, mixed with a sense of having to let something go, having to see through something about the solidity of that, the seeming solidity of that realm, or the seeming projections of that realm. So again, the practice in the God realm is contemplating impermanence. The practice in the jealous God realm is overcoming jealousy via sympathetic joy and compassion. And the practice in the human realm is mixing gratitude with a sense of urgency. So I'd like us to move for about 20 minutes, if you're willing, into our breakout rooms. And again, if you do not want to participate in the breakout room, all the humans will be there. No, I'm kidding. If you do not want to participate in the breakout room, we'll just do a journaling on the prompts for tonight and tonight's discussion and this week's quad questions. And I'll just post them on the chat board. And I see questions are coming in, so we'll save those for after our breakout groups. So I'm putting them in the chat, and I'll just read them. What have your experiences of the higher realms been recently in your own life? The recent experiences of the higher realms. How are these experiences empowering, and or how are these experiences entrapping? How can the jealous God realm be imbued with compassion? Why is the human realm the only place we can achieve awakening? And what insight comes to mind when you contemplate the phrase, don't waste time? So I know that's a lot, and we'll just have 20 minutes in our breakout room. So if you just want to pick one that feels the most rich in your contemplation or experience right now, or pick two, that's completely fine. But we will now break up into breakout groups. So please remember the step up, step back, and enjoy each other's company in the human realm. Okay. So I hope that was a useful conversation. And at this point, we have some time for discussion in our large group or questions. You can grab the mic or grab the chat box, or just insights that you want to share.
Ian,
Hey.
I've heard talked about in various teachings about the merit that you gain in this life or a past life would increase your likelihood in being born into the human realm. Can you speak to that some?
Sure. The quality of generating merit, sort of interesting because it almost feels like it's creating this new karmic currency. You know, like it's almost like the Buddhist Bitcoin or something like that. But the idea is that there is a kind of accumulation of outcomes related to the cultivation of positive karmic seeds in that eighth consciousness, in that storehouse consciousness, and that sort of impelling or perfuming our experience in a certain direction. And in the so I guess in the Tibetan system, the notion is that the intermediary experience or the bardo experience is where the kind of quality of the what's in the eighth consciousness really takes over, because that's all of the physical form and the other consciousness is supposedly dissolved, and that is really the impelling consciousness. So if you go back to the 12 nidanas, in some interpretations, in the more like literal reincarnation interpretations, the way that's framed is that the first two nidanas of ignorance and karmic formations refer to a past lifetime. And I've sometimes heard it translated that there's the third nidana describes the kind of bardo experience of the impelling consciousness and then the arrived consciousness. And so merit is the idea that you've generated conditions. Now, nothing is a one-to-one ratio in Buddhism because cause and effect is interdependent. It's complex. But you've generated conditions that are positive, that are almost like a probability matrix, so that the next situation you arise in is more beneficial. And so in Buddhist thought, the dedication of merit is a way to, you could say, decentralize. Here's a way of looking at it, and I'm sort of thinking about this in terms of the seventh consciousness, to take the positive karma that's generated, to take the positive karma, and rather than have that accumulate just in one's own eighth consciousness, and further one's own egoic being, to spread that out to many beings, right? So that's what the dedication of merit serves. The dedication of merit is not anti-self. It's saying, like, may I receive the benefit of this practice too, but may the benefits of practice spread beyond me. May whatever the positive influences, whatever seeds have been watered or replanted by this effort, may they lead to some future situation that is mutually beneficial. So merit, there's two accumulations, you could say. This is another interpretation, that in the Tibetan system, and this may sound a little different from what I just said, so I want to note that. In the Tibetan system, it's sometimes said that you accumulate virtue and you accumulate merit, right? And so virtue, I think of sometimes as having a kind of quality of virtuous karma. It's the potential for good things to happen. And merit is actually positive outcomes in the world, right? So the potential doesn't equal a positive outcome, but merit in that view is the accumulation of more positive and beneficial outcomes, which would obviously also manifest in one's environment, you know? So it's interesting because we're entering a system when we look at the higher realms, you know, this really, and this is also a challenge in the modern world, to contemplate what does it actually mean to earn a positive situation, right? There's clearly some union of personal work involved, right? Nobody can really get around that in a positive situation or a positive, you know, when a person has a lot of discipline, there's something that they've done to accumulate positive karma if they have good discipline or good generosity. And at the same time, there must be a supportive environment. So there's not a clarity in Buddhist thought about the relationship between what we are cultivating and what the environment is bringing about. But the notion is that the generation of merit is the individual taking this attitude of whatever positivity is created through my practice, may those seeds spread beyond just my own consciousness. So I hope that's helpful. It's not easy to get a like really pinpointed definition of merit. I haven't heard one that really nailed the definition for me. I'm seeing here, confused by the human realm being considered better. Is that because of the Mahayana? I don't want to say it's better. I mean, if you can spend a Sunday afternoon in the God realm, you know, please do. Everybody here should have a little God realm experience. Otherwise, how are we going to know that it's flawed? You know, you can't really, you can't reject something until you've tried it. But the notion is that it's balanced, and its kleshas or its neurotic experiences have to do with wanting to know. So there's a kind of return to a curiosity and a connection that is helpful to the path of awakening. You're right that in the God realm, there is, if you quantified it, my guess, I've never heard it said this way, but in the eighth consciousness, a God realm being would have more positive karmic seeds stored in the eighth consciousness than a human realm being. But they would also have a stronger seventh consciousness. And there wouldn't be a resiliency towards that experience ending. So the thing about the human realm is we are a little bit more used to the truth of suffering. We're a little bit more available to impermanence and discomfort, and we can turn that sense of impermanence into an urgency to awaken rather than just as a subtle threat to our being, which is what the God realm views it as. But in the classic teachings, the God realm and the jealous God realm, the beings who live there are definitely more powerful than the human realm. So I hope that's helpful, Tracy.
Hello?
Hello. Hi, Dorian.
Hi. Well, when you were speaking, something came up. It felt urgency a little bit because this is all so exciting and fascinating. I think about my father. I've been witnessing him very closely and feeling what he's going through at 92. And it's so interesting to see that he gets stuck in these realms. And some people might want to come up with a label. Oh, is this dementia? Oh, does he have Alzheimer's? And I actually find that he's extremely sane sometimes. Mm-hmm. And other times there are these parts of his life and parts of his parents' life. I mean, this is coming through him, and I find it fascinating because it feels so karmic. Mm-hmm. It feels, it makes sense. That the sense of discipline that we're trying to to manifest here about watching our emotions, watching our afflictive emotions, being aware of other people and their feelings and suffering, I realized that my father, in many ways, has not.
Mm.
And it's really coming out now. This is a great example of what might happen to any of us, and why we're most lucky to have these trainings here, or if we were going to a therapist in Western psychology. But when you see this kind of thing, you know, an alpha male, very successful, a good man, a good family man, a hard worker, an athlete, a good student, but you really can see that there were so many things that were left unattended to, that are sort of an unawareness, if you will, of oneself and of others. And then it reminds me of when I studied with a POA practice. And at first, it did feel sort of out of control. I felt like I was going somewhere, too much breath, and, but I was aware that, that's what we were working on, being present, rehearsing for the time of death. And I could feel it so much in my being that this is the point. The point is to be present now and then, because the interim, I'm seeing my father in these intermediate states, but he's very much here. He does not have any illness, really. It just seems to be so poignant and applicable.
Thank you. Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. And we're also going to look at how the Buddha manifests, or perhaps how a bodhisattva manifests with the lower realm mind states next week, which can also be a way of working with ourselves when we feel stuck in a lower or more painful rut, and can also be a way of showing up for others. But one thing that comes to mind as you say this is just the sense of being present with somebody like that as a teaching for you, as a reminder of your own precious situation and your own practice, and the gratitude and the urgency for that. And one of the things that I love from classic Buddhism, from the life of the Buddha, is this teaching called the Four Divine Messengers, which is like, talk about Charles Dickens and the ghosts of Christmas Past. This is what sets the Buddha on his path. And what's fascinating is all of the divine messengers are just people. That's who his four divine messengers are. So at first he sees a sick person, right? And then he sees an elderly person, aging, right? And then he sees a corpse, right? And then he sees a yogi, not a Buddhist yogi, because those didn't exist yet, because he was the Buddha in training, but a spiritual practitioner. And these send a message about creating urgency around human life. And they're also, three of them are all about the sick, the aging, and the dead, are all about reminders of impermanence. And the Buddha was having early on in his life, by all accounts of the narrative, a very higher realm experience. So it was tuning into these, what happens in human life to all of us, that he took as sort of a sacred message, four divine messengers. And I love that notion of actually, tuning into just the actual parameters, the facts of life, and how that actually can sort of put us sort of right on the head of that needle of the human realm in an awakened or awakening way. So thank you for that. We have time for one more, and then we're going to do a contemplation of precious human life, or precious human birth, to close tonight. Yes. So the story of the four divine messengers is when the Buddha first comes out of the palace in that version of the story. And the notion is that his father, in his narcissistic desires, has tried to shield any signs of suffering from the Buddha, but he sees these four examples of beings in pain anyway. So Lisa's saying these teachers were actually modeling rather than directly teaching. Is that because he was in the God realm? Yes, that's the point I was making, is that the way the Buddha appears in each of the realms, it's only in the human realm that the Buddha shows up as a teacher who can offer instructions or guidance or direct explicit mentorship. In every other realm, he's appearing as some form of modeling experience. And I think you would say, Lisa, that in the higher realms, he's modeling something. And in the lower realms, he's just offering some, especially the hell realm and the hungry ghost realm. The Buddha shows up, she, they, he, with some support, some soothing, some healing for the intensity of the confusion or the intensity of the suffering. So the Buddha shows up as a model or as a support in the other realms. And only when a being has this balance of comfort or groundedness and spaciousness with urgency and curiosity can a Buddha actually show up and teach or guide and instruct. So, yeah. So thank you all. It looks frozen. Can you all?
Did we lose Ethan?
I did.
Did you?
Yeah, he's gone.
Can you all hear me?
There he is.
Okay. Great.
I had a quick question about can I even remember what I was going to say? No, just the combination of comfort and urgency being connected to the teachings, and that it's like, does that mean that other humans that don't have this, that haven't quite seen the light or whatever, does that necessarily put them in a different realm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question, and this is like, obviously there's a note, you can see why this would go down sort of a route of fundamentalist belief pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's not like the chosen ones. That's not what we're saying here. It's looking at the balance of how open a being is to actually the inquisitiveness of looking deeply into their experience, you know? And so another subtle distinction that's sometimes made is the distinction between the human realm as a space of intellectualism and passion and romanticism, etc., questioning in general, like the relationship between that and the precious human realm, which is this sort of more woke or awakened approach of like, I'm on a path and I want to look deeply, right? So sometimes that distinction is made. But if we're assuming that all six realms occur within our human experience, then I would say that you could say that in that moment, the person's in another realm or isn't really open to their human realm experience. You know, they're still pledging, like, I know so many people who have a lot of human moments, but they're pledging their allegiance to the jealous God realm, you know? Does that make sense? You know, so it's
it does. It helps. Thank you.
There's a quality of where are we pledging our allegiance to, and to be a Buddhist, that's actually what I think it means more than anything else is like, it's not a religious designation for me. Although some people would say it definitely is, and that's, there's a lot of good back and forth about that. To me, it's like I'm pledging my allegiance to the human realm, and I want to wake up there. So I want to come back there when I get a little caught up in the animal realm or the jealous God realm. So let's take our seat for just a few minutes. We'll do just a 5-minute closing meditation or so. So I'm just going to state the translation of this contemplation of precious human birth that comes from the 4 reminders in the Tibetan Buddhist system. Then we can just plant those in our mind and see what thoughts or images or emotions or experiences arise. Joyful to have such a human life. Difficult to find. Free and well-favored. So here, free.
I only see
Coming
you.
back now.
I'm so sorry.
There he is.
It's kicked me off. I'm not sure what's happening with the Wi-Fi here in the office. So maybe we can just come back briefly. Joyful to have such a human life. Difficult to find. Free and well-favored.
We heard the second of the 4 reminders.
Joyful to have such a human life. Difficult to find. Free and well-favored. So that's the full contemplation of precious human birth. The free refers to the contemplation of negative states that we are free from, which is the gratitude element. And well-favored refers to the contemplation of positive qualities or advantages or positive traits that we have, and the urgency of actually using these to wake up and benefit beings. Joyful to have such a human life, difficult to find, free and well-favored. And then the second of the 4 reminders is the truth of impermanence, which I think is beautifully mapped by this chant from the Soto Zen tradition, the Evening Gata. So if you'd like to say that with me, please feel free. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. On this night, the days of our life are decreased by 1. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken, take heed, do not squander your life. Then if you'd like to make a commitment to your regular meditation practice this coming week, we can recite or contemplate together the 7-day meditation vow. I, Ethan, with confidence in the benefits of a regular practice of sitting meditation, do hereby commit for myself and no one else to practicing at least 1 session of sitting meditation for as short or as long a period of time as I am willing and able for each of the next 7 days. So again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'll post on the Dropbox both the phrasing of the precious human birth and also the phrasing of the Evening Gata. There's several different translations of both of those for those of you interested. And next week, we will work with the lower realms, noticing the experience of the lower realms in ourselves, how to work with those, what practices to do, and how to help others if we have friends or loved ones or irritating people occupying the lower realms. So that'll be the topic for next week, week 7. Thank you all so much. Have a great week, and we'll either see you Saturday or next Tuesday. Bye-bye.